Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is the Friday Challenge video where I'm going to be showing you 10 comics that I actually can't believe I have in my collection. These are books that I'm really proud to have in my collection. When I look at them, I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I have that book. And I just get excited just seeing them in my collection. There are also comics that either took me a while to obtain, or they're ones that I just never expected to be able to afford. It's not always about the money. Sometimes it's about just the difficulty of finding the book. So if you want to participate in this kind of challenge where you show maybe some of your favorite books, maybe some of your top 10 ones that you're just shocked that you have in your collection, just make a video, top 10, top 10 wow, top 10 wow. And that's the hashtag to use, and Friday Comic Challenge. I'm going to get into it. The first one will surprise you guys. Probably you'll be like, oh my goodness, not that one. Well, this one is kind of major to me because it's one that I've only seen up for auction once. And I've been collecting for a long time. And this is a series that I really like. And I've only seen it offered once. And I didn't realize until just recently, somebody sent me a link where they showed how rare this book is. There was only 250 of these printed, which makes it extremely rare. And it's a modern book. And of that 250, I'm not even sure how many survived, because the census has less than 10. So very, very rare book. And it's Zombie Tramp. This is the very first appearance of Zombie Tramp. As I said, they only printed a couple hundred of these. It is just incredibly hard to find. This was published in 2009. It lasted for 3 issues, and then went into a second series, which lasted 4 issues. And then went into a third series that lasted a few issues. And then it went into a 4th series, which is the ongoing title. So it just, this is the book that started it all. It is the passion work of Dan Mendoza. And it was one that I always wanted because I had collected the whole entire run of the ongoing series of Zombie Tramp. I collected the other series as well, but finding the first 3 issues that were like sort of his passion project, where he just did it on his own budget and printed them off, has been those books are just incredibly hard to find. I found 1 and 2. I'm still looking for number 3, and I've had it on my want list for 3 years now. So this is Zombie Tramp number 1. It's obviously her first appearance. And it's just a classic book, in my opinion. It is just one, I keep it right in front of me. I look at this, like whenever I'm doing these shows, I'm usually looking at this book. I'm just like so amazed that I have this in my collection. And I have this amongst some pretty major books, so that it's actually kind of funny that this is such a major book to me, because it's not one most people would think of, but it is major to me. I'm really excited that I have this in my collection. I get thrilled every time that I see it, because I'm like, I know how hard it is to find it. So Zombie Tramp number 1, really hard book to find. As I said, only seen it once. Another one that is somewhat hard to find, but you can find it. But usually when you find it, it's unaffordable. That's really the thing about this book. It's a classic one. And it's one that I always thought would be a really cool one to own, but I didn't think I would actually ever own it. One came up on eBay. Like, the cheapest one I had seen for the longest time, the cheapest one was $8,000. And I was like, I like the book, but $8,000, it's a bit much. Then I saw this one, which was presented really, really well. I realized after the fact that it's incomplete, but it presents really, really well. it's missing the centerfold, is Startling Comics number 49. This is the classic Bender cover. And even in this grade, it goes for about $4,000. It's crazy expensive. But I decided to kind of pony up for it, I guess, pay that extra amount to get this book. Because I was happy to get a book that really presents well. I mean, it looks like at least a 3, if not a 4. It presents really, really well, even though it is incomplete. And, you know, I'm just happy to have it in my collection. And it's really about the cover. The interior art is not the greatest. The interior story is not the greatest. But this cover is one of the classic Alex Schomburg covers. It's also known as the Bender cover. It's the one that inspired Matt Groening to create the character Bender for Futurama. And this is that, you know, sort of prototype for that character. I just love this book. And it's a classic bondage cover too. It's got the girl in the red dress, you know, and she's being carried off by the robot. And if you look at, like, it's an Alex Schomburg cover. If you look at the metal, just the way he almost creates this shine on it, it's just so well rendered. It's an airbrush cover that's just amazing. I always love this cover. So this is number 9 on my list. Not that it's in any particular order, this is just how I stacked them. But I really was shocked when I finally got this in my collection. I didn't ever think I would ever find a copy or even be able to afford it. The same goes with this one. Actually, I had bid on this book once, once, and it was a 0.5 copy. Just beat. Like totally destroyed looking. And it was, as I said, it was a 0.5, and it looked every much like a 0.5. And it was raw. It was even graded. And it sold for $10,000. I was like, what? And, you know, there's certain books where they just say, oh, okay, that book, even in the worst possible condition, is out of my price range. Now, there were, like, one of the things that I realized, and this is something that really changed the way I collect, and one of the books that's in here kind of changed my way of thinking, is that you can make payments. Some people will accept that, where you can make payments on something, where you can, you know, do like scheduled payments and gradually pay something off. So I found a dealer who was really good. He was willing to work with me where I can make like a lot of payments, just like a lot of payments, and not just, you know, have to pay it in like 3 months or something like that, because I still wouldn't have been able to afford it. It's something more like I need like 8 to 10 months to pay it off. But they were willing to work with me on the price and the payment plan. And they didn't charge me extra for the fact that it was a payment plan. And this book, I'm just always impressed that I have this in my collection, because as I said, I did bid on a 0.5 copy, totally got destroyed. I didn't have any hope of winning it. I think I did go up to 6,000. that was my bid, and just kept on going on beyond that. And it was this one, Detective Comics number 38. This is the first appearance of Robin, and it's just a classic book. I mean, it's just, Robin is like probably an A tier character. You know, he's probably the most famous sidekick in comics. He's just such an iconic character, and such a, you know, he's almost like an appendage for Batman. After this point, every cover with Batman has Robin. He is just associated to Batman. He is what, you know, he's just as much part of Batman as his utility belt or his cowl. Robin is a key character. And it's actually interesting. If you look at the golden age of comics, Robin actually appears more often than Batman does. Because whenever Batman, after this point, every cover with Batman has Robin. But Robin actually gets his own little series in Star Spangled, where he has a few comic covers by himself. So there's actually more comic covers with Robin in it. Now, the reason I could afford this book, and this was almost as affordable as the 0.5 one that I lost on, was the fact that it's restored. The payment plans and the restoration really saved me a lot of money on this book. Made it very affordable. So I was quite happy to get this one. So Detective Comics number 38. Really great book. Really proud to have that in my collection, and shocked whenever I see it. It's again one of those books that I have up on my wall. I look at it every time that I come into this room. Another one that I never thought I would have, especially because there was a sale for this book in a lower grade, actually. That was $400,000. I was like, man, I'm like, it's just like, it's like certain books you just think, okay, you're never going to get that book. That's just too much money for a comic. But what happened was this one came up, and it's another restored book, and it came up on Heritage, and I actually phoned Heritage because I knew that I still couldn't afford it. I knew I couldn't afford it, but they actually had payment plans as well. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take them up on the payment plans. And I wanted to get this book. I'm a big fan of history. And I'm a big fan of Good Girl. And I was setting myself on this path of trying to collect all of the books that were mentioned in The Seduction of the Innocent by Frederick Wortham. And this is one of the ones that is kind of most iconic of all the comics that were mentioned in The Seduction of the Innocent, because it was even featured in one of the panels where they showed the cover. Not many comics have that feature to them, but this one did. And this is, as I said, it had a sale of $400,000, which makes it one of the most pricey comics of all time. It was an 8.0 copy that sold for $400,000, and I was shocked. Then this one came up later in a restored grade, but 8.5. So higher grade, 8.5. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for it, see what it goes for. And I bid up. I thought I had it. I was winning at around 8,000, which is a lot of money for this book. And then it kept on going. And I was like, oh man, I guess I got to, bid a bit higher and more aggressively. It went up to 14,000. That is a lot of money for this book. I mean, it is a high grade, but the restoration really made me nervous. I think I did okay, because this is, such a classic Matt Baker cover, maybe some Al Feldstein elements, headlight cover, bondage cover, one that was featured very prominently in The Seduction of the Innocent. It is just such an iconic cover. To me, this is one of the best covers of all time. Just so much about it that I love. I think the woman looks incredibly sexy, and just sort of, she's powerful yet in a very compromised pose with this rope wrapped around her. You get the bad guys coming up from the background. There's just so many elements to this book, and the colors, the contrast between her blue costume and the yellow background, just really great. Really like this one. Just such a great comic. I'm always amazed that I have this in my collection. I didn't think I'd ever get it. So Phantom Lady number 17, just a major book. So yeah, I was pretty excited about that one. Another one that, same idea. This one wasn't as expensive, but it was one that I was sort of chasing as a child. I didn't know why I was chasing it. When I was a kid, I really liked the character Plastic Man. I just thought he was cool. In Canada, we have a character called Flat Stanley. And basically the story is that this boy is run over by a steamroller and he becomes flat. And he's like basically very similar to Plastic Man. He can be folded. He actually in one of the stories, he basically folds himself up into a letter size, and he gets mailed across country. You know, there was fun stories around Flat Stanley. Well, Plastic Man kind of was similar to Flat Stanley, but he was also a superhero, and he could stretch out. He could do all these kind of fun, quirky things. I just really liked the idea of that. That, you know, this guy that could turn into whatever shape that he wants. And I was a big fan of Plastic Man. So one of the things that I did was, as a kid, I really didn't have much exposure to comic shops. Where I lived, there really wasn't any comic shops. We had a coin store, which is interesting. We had coins, but no comics. And the coin store had like a few comics. The one that I told many times about was Finding Howard the Duck #1. And that was really the first comic I collected. Well, that shop was very limited. But when I was in high school, I finally got to go to a big city to actually find comics and really kind of spread my wings in terms of what I could buy for myself. Because up to that point, I was really buying or really getting comics that were what my parents would want me to get. They would buy me Archie and Richie Rich and Scrooge McDuck. That was pretty much what I was limited to. But I actually did like the superhero comics. I did like Plastic Man. And they took me to, I was on a school trip, so I could do whatever I wanted. And I had a little bit of money. I didn't have like big money or anything. But I went to a comic shop and I said, I want to get the first appearance of Plastic Man. Where's Plastic Man #1? And I picked up a copy of the most recent Plastic Man series. It was like, not his #1 or not his first appearance. It was just Plastic Man #1, but later series. And I thought that was his first appearance for the longest time, because we didn't have the internet. We didn't know, I didn't have the guides or anything like that. So I didn't know that it was not really his first appearance. It was only until more recently, like in the last 20 years, that I learned that Plastic Man made his first appearance in Police Comics. Well, finding Police Comics #1 next to impossible. And whenever I saw it, it would always go for crazy prices. That I just didn't want to. It was just too much. I do like Plastic Man, but I do want to have some money left over. Again, it was about finding restored copies. This is one of my tricks, is I can't afford comics sometimes. Well, the way that I can afford some of the bigger books is to buy restored copies. And I was able to find a Police Comics #1 for in a restored 7.0. And it has like moderate amounts of restoration. Restoration includes color touch, pieces added, reinforced. And it's from the collection of John Burke. So kind of a cool book. And this is the first appearance of Plastic Man. He's even on the cover right there. And it's also the first appearance of Phantom Lady. I just showed Phantom Lady. Well, this is where she made her first appearance. A lot of major characters actually made their first appearance in the Police Comics, like the Spirit is another one I can think of. Just a really cool title, and I was pretty excited to get this. I had bid on a few of them, but they always went for crazy prices. This was one of those ones where it was on Comic Connect, and it went for a reasonable price. It was very affordable compared to some of these other books. So I was quite excited about that. Typically, if it was a blue label, this would be like a $60,000 book. So it was much more affordable than that. Speaking about affordable, and maybe this one is not affordable, but this is another one where it was timing. Timing was kind of everything with this book. I was in between houses, and I sort of had a bit of cash in my account because I had just sold my house. And my business was doing really, really well at the time. So this was the first big comic for me, one that really inspired me to say, hey, maybe I can go for those big books. I've talked about this book many, many times in terms of that element, where it really made me think, hey, I can go for big books. I can target those big books that are pricey. You know, this one was probably, you know, like up till that point, the most I had ever spent on a comic was maybe $300. I think that was probably the peak that I had ever spent. This book just shot that budget out the window, and it really changed my comic book collecting. And it's All-Star Comics number 8. This book, you know, was a $20,000 book. Yeah, huge. It was a huge expense. But it's the first appearance of Wonder Woman, a character that I really believed in. I always felt like her comics were underrated and underappreciated and undervalued. And to have one of the grails of comics in general, like I'd say this is in the top 10 of all comics in terms of price. You have like the action ones, and you know, All-Star 8s are in that because it's in the $1 million club. It's like you know, it's had sales above that $1 million mark, which puts it in a very niche bracket, and sort of that unattainable kind of level. Well, to have one of those books in your collection is just, it's an exciting thing. It's just, wow, I can't believe I have this in my collection. And to have that first appearance of a major character like Wonder Woman is really exciting for me. You know, there's other ones that I'm chasing after. Like, I'd love to have the first appearance of Batman. I'd love to have the first appearance of Superman. I'd love to have the first appearance of the Flash. But, you know, this is my favorite female character, other than Vampirella. I like Vampirella a lot. I'm a big Vampirella fan. But, you know, Wonder Woman is kind of the pinnacle of important female characters. So I really like this one. Too bad she's not on the cover, but All-Star 8 is definitely a really major book and really set me up as a different type of collector, where I could go, I decided that I would go after bigger books, and I could, you know, make ways of finding, you gotta, it's all about negotiating, where you make the deals and you basically negotiate and get the payment plans or whatever it is to make it happen. So, yeah, that was a big one for me. Yeah, that was really huge. To go along with that one, number 4 on my list is another Wonder Woman one. This one, again, I didn't think I would ever be able to own. It's just one that I've always been excited by. It's actually one of my favorite Wonder Woman covers of all time. I just love the cover. It's her first title too. This one is kind of, I'm always like fluctuating between what is my favorite Wonder Woman book that I own. And sometimes it's the All-Star 8 because that's the first appearance. Sometimes it's the Sensation 1 because that's a cool cover. It's her first cover. And then sometimes it's this one. And I'm always struggling to decide which one I like the most. And part of the reason for that is this one, to me, is just so iconic. The fact that it's her first title with her name. I don't know why they called Sensation 1 Sensation 1. Why didn't they call it Wonder Woman 1? You know, had they, I might like that book a bit more. This one is also just the iconic thing where she's, you know, on the horse going across in the cavalry charge with, you know, going into the German trenches. It's just, you know, it's just such a great cover. Yeah, World War II cover. Yeah, it's just one of those awesome books. Yeah, I love it. I don't know even what to say. H.E. Peter cover, just brilliant. So yeah, so I was always amazed that I could find that. Again, it's about these payment plans. I got that from my comic shop. They allowed for payment plans, and that's how I was able to afford it. This one is another one where I got it through payment plans. This is a recent pickup. Again, this is one of those books that I'm amazed that I have. I was for a long time very jealous anytime I saw people with this comic. I just thought, wow, that is just such a cool book. It's really the coolness factor of this book. It's not even about the price. That's not what it is. To me, this is just a cool book. To me, this is the pinnacle of greatness for pre-code horror covers. I just love the dark humor of it, where he's toasting and he's a skeletal hand, and he's also revealing that she is that she represents death as well. And the story actually inside reflects all this. But it also has the good girl element. She's actually a pretty attractive girl. And it's just a really interesting cover. Just so many elements to it. And it's just, I don't know. For me, it's just such a great book. I just really love this one. To get this as a non-restored, this is not restored, and a reasonably high grade, a 5.5, presents incredibly well, is very exciting. So this one, again, it's all about payment plans. But I can't believe I finally got this one in my collection. It's like one of those things, oh, am I going to make it through the payment plans? Am I going to be able to finally have this paid and in my hands? And I almost don't believe that it's real, because it was like months and months and months and months of paying for this book. And to finally get it is just really, really cool. Okay, so that's number 3 on my list. Number 2 on my list is an interesting one. In a way, this one was one I sort of kicked myself, because I could have gotten this for really cheap, really, 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 really cheap, actually. Back in the 90s, around 1995, 1996, a lot of the comic shops, especially around 96, a lot of the comic shops in my town, I was living in Halifax, Nova Scotia at the time, were going under. They were all collapsing. It was sort of the crash, the major crash in the comic book industry. Like, we think of the COVID crash. Well, the crash of the mid-90s was far, far worse. Shops were literally going out of business and fire selling all of their comics. Well, one of the comics that I saw on the wall that they were fire selling, and they would have sold it for probably like dirt cheap, was this book. But I'm an idiot. I have to say I'm a total idiot, because we just didn't have the access to information that we do now. I didn't know the significance of this book. I thought it was cool. I thought it was significant, but I didn't realize how significant it was. I didn't realize, what it was. And I always kick myself that I didn't buy it at the time, because it would have been, I think it would have been a couple $100. And when you see the book, you'll be like, oh man, you could have gotten that for a couple $100 or more. But yeah, I didn't realize the significance, because it wasn't number 1. I was thinking, oh, it has to be number 1 in order to be the first appearance. But yeah, that's how dumb I am. It's Tales of Suspense, number 39. And I literally could have picked this up for a couple $100, and high grade too. This one I didn't wasn't that fortunate, but I did get a real good price on this one. This one is another restored book, but the restoration is the lamest restoration of all of the comics in my collection. I believe that it's just the little bit on the corner here. It's just like a little. It's like not even like all the way along. It's just like a little, like millimeter that's been trimmed on the book. So it's got a little bit of trimming on both the top and the bottom corners. I don't even know why they did that. Maybe just because there's a little bit of the overlap and they just trimmed it off. Well, that's the restoration on this book. As a result, though, I got this dirt cheap compared to what it normally sells for. I think it was like about $2,000, which is not bad. I think not a bad price for this book. In a 7.0, presents really, really nicely. It is the first appearance of Iron Man. It's such a key book. I still kick myself to this day that I didn't buy at the time. And I thought after that, like I realized afterwards, like a couple of years later, that what it was and how stupid I was to pass on it. But at the time I didn't realize. I just always kick myself. And I thought, oh, that was the one opportunity that I had to pick up this book. And I'd never have another opportunity again. Well, fortunately, that wasn't the case, and I was able to pick it up. So I always, whenever I look at this book, I always remember that could have situation, but it didn't happen. And fortunately, I was able to get it later. So Tales of Suspense number 39 is number 2 on my list. Number 1 on my list is an interesting one. This one is just a rare book. Incredibly rare. I've only seen this one copy ever. So I think there's 4 known copies to exist at all. As a Canadian, this is a key book that even in the condition that it is such an iconic book and important book for Canadian history that it's just a pleasure to have this in my collection. It is one of those books that, oh, it could be a museum piece kind of level. It's just like, it's like, this is such a major book. In Canada, during the war, in order to save paper, one of the things that they did was, and really support local, the idea was to support local publishers and businesses within Canada. And they had sort of a trade embargo that affected comic books and a whole bunch of things, where they basically blocked imports from the US into Canada in order to protect Canadian business, in order to basically support the war effort. Because if they figured they, supported local businesses, that would help generate more revenue, which they could use for the war effort. And it impacted comics. However, because they couldn't import US comics, local comic book publishers started producing comics for the local market. And they came up with their own characters, which was a very cool thing. And these characters were, in the last 10 years or so, were immortalized on Canadian stamps. And one of the characters was Nelvana. And she's just a kind of an iconic character for Canada. She's the first female superhero that we've created. And she actually appeared before Wonder Woman. So very important character, very early female superhero. And she made her first appearance in this comic. This is Tramp Adventure Comics number 1. And this comic itself is an early Canadian white. They were called Canadian whites because they were printed in black ink on white paper. so it was like, one of those things. It's a black and white book, therefore it's Canadian whites. These books, this is a coverless copy, that's why it's NG at the top. Sadly, it doesn't have the cover. The cover isn't that great, actually, for this cover. It's actually not even a great cover. But it would have been nice to have the cover. But this is the only copy I've ever seen available for sale. It's just such a hard book to find. And these Canadian whites were printed on the worst type of paper. Almost like toilet paper, kind of level of quality of paper. And they would basically fall apart. And as a result, not many survived. And this is one of the earliest of the Canadian whites. and is such a major key because it's their first appearance of Nelvana, and it's such a major book. Now this one I actually saw somebody had this exact copy, and they wanted $11,000 for it, and I was like, oh man, there's no way I can afford $11,000 for a coverless copy. It's just too much. But they couldn't sell it. Fortunately, they wanted to sell it for that price, and probably that wasn't that far off. I think they at one point they had it at 15,000 Canadian or US. I mean, but then they lowered the price to 11. But then they decided to put it up for auction, and they didn't list it the best. You know, a few people bid on it, it did go up, but it didn't really sell for nearly as much, and it ended up selling for $2,000, which is what I paid for it. So I was very excited. I was like shaking when I won this, because I was like, I put a bid. I think I put a bid of 4,000 or 5,000 just to. It was at 1,000, and I put like some really high bid, just to see if I would win it. And when I won it for 2, I was like so excited. I was like shaking. I was so excited to have this book. I couldn't believe I finally captured some. This is like a museum book because it's just so rare. As I said, there's only 4 known copies. You know, this is probably the lowest grade, but it is complete. Sadly, without the cover. But just such a key book for Canadian history and for comic books. So definitely one that's really important to me. Again, it's one that I always proudly display and love to look at, just because it's such a key book. So yeah, so those are my top 10 books for ones that I can't believe that I have in my collection. If you want to show, you know, your top 10, all you have to do is use the hashtag top 10 wow and and Friday comic challenge, and you use those 2 hashtags, and then post a video, and also you can link me in there in the description, and I will get a notification that you've made a video, and I'll check it out. So it's fun. A lot of people in the community participate in these cover challenges, and yeah, it's just a fun thing to do. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give me your feedback in the comments below, and stay tuned for next week, where I'm going to show you my top 10 weirdest, you know, WTF books in my collection, which I'm like amazed that I have in not such a positive way. Like, what am I doing with these books? So that'll be next week. So again, thanks for watching. Bye for now.